here with us to talk about this situation is the former U.S. National Security Advisor and 32nd Commandant of the United States Marine Corps. I am humbled at the opportunity to introduce a great American who served his country in uniform and also continues to serve humanity through his advocacy on causes like this, General Jim Jones.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Like everyone here, I am saddened by the fact that the celebration that we hope to achieve and advocate today has been stolen from us in this very, very sad and tragic attack on Camp Liberty. And I would like to join all of my colleagues on the dais in expressing our deepest condolences for your great loss. This is not the first time, sadly, that attacks and massacres of this nature has taken place and befallen the people of Camp Ashraf and the men and women of Camp Liberty. Camp Liberty has a name that is not worthy of a prison, which it has become. Liberty is a precious goal that we hope to achieve and will achieve for the people of Iran in the days and months ahead. We gather today at a very consequential, pivotal time, a tragic time, as it turns out. It seems hard to believe that it was only a little over 2 years ago that a young street vendor, fed up with being bullied by police and deprived of justice, stood in the central square of a small Tunisian town, poured gasoline all over himself, on his head, and immolated himself in protest. His story and the images that we see before us today sweep across the world and rekindle a revolution across the Middle East and North Africa, and has had and will have a continuing powerful effect on how men and women of this planet are led by their leaders. Since that time in Tunisia, consider that Tunisia's Ben Ali is gone. Egypt's Mubarak is gone. Libya's Gaddafi is gone. And coming soon, hopefully very soon, Bashir Assad will be gone. And hopefully soon after that, thank you. Then hopefully soon after the departure of Assad, the end of the regime in Tehran. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a bad time to be a dictator. There is no escape. There is no place they can hide, and their destiny is foretold. No one can say exactly how or when these struggles for freedom will play out in the short term. There will be fits and starts in the uneasy journey of true reform and transformation. The outcome from country to country may likely differ, but what is clear is that we find ourselves at an historic inflection point, and the stakes are monumental. akin to those in the twilight struggle of the Cold War. Across the arc of this great awakening, a defining contest is being waged between the aspirants of modernity that earnestly seek to satisfy the people's demands for greater opportunity, freedom, and human rights, and the forces of regression intent on seizing this time of transition and upheaval to continue a continuing brand of tyranny and oppression. There is much that the United States can and must do in favor of freedom. Suffice it to say that the general tide of history is now on the side of freedom and progress. In this remarkable age of instant communication and the expanding power of people to learn, to organize, and to act, the capability for would-be tyrants and rogue regimes to impose their despotic and will through fear and force of arms is weakening by the day. And from that happy reality, my friends, there is no turning back, despite this great tragedy that saddens us here today. We are mindful of the fact that the first stirrings of the awakening that unfolded before us did not emanate from the central plazas of Cairo, Tunis, or Damascus, but from the gathering place nearer and dearer to the hearts of the people gathered here today. Azadi Square in Tehran, when a day of rage for the Iranian people gave rise to a season of change across the region. It is deeply ironic that the regime in Tehran, which has worked so hard to snuff out reform in Iran, which has harassed, arrested, and executed Iranian people for daring to speak out, and which has turned its back on universal pleas for reform, remains the chief antagonist of democracy and liberalization, not just in Iran, but everywhere it is struggling to develop. And by democratic reform, I don't just mean guaranteeing the rights of people to cast a vote, as important as that is, but building the full architecture of true democracy and liberty, free institutions, impartial justice, the rule of law, checks on power, and the respect of human rights. It is also deeply ironic that Iran, one of the richest, most accomplished, and storied cultures in the history of the world, has been hijacked by oppressors whose only accomplishment has rendered a proud country into an international outlaw and making it the globe's greatest threat to peace and stability. So it is far more than ironic that the backward-focused Iranian regime looks to acquire the most modern and destructive weapons known to man as an instrument of regional domination and intimidation. We can't help but acknowledge that the plain reality that if weapons of mass destruction come into the possession of this regime, including a nuclear capability, they would most certainly find their way into the hands of terrorist groups abetted by their masters in Tehran. This eventuality poses perhaps the greatest threat to global order and the prospects for enduring peace and prosperity in the 21st century. Such an eventuality is unacceptable, and it must not come to pass. As a former national security advisor, I witnessed firsthand the intransigence, the duplicity, the deceit, and the lies emanating from the regime in Tehran with regard to their intentions and with regard to their goals for controlling the people of Tehran and Iran and keeping them shackled and unable to enjoy the freedoms that most of us enjoy today. Negotiations are a joke, only to be stymied at every turn. The effect of current sanctions, while increasingly severe, and we know that the regime is feeling their effects, but nevertheless, the Supreme Leader rejects bilateral talks with the United States. Iran, of course, has agreed to resume nuclear talks at the P5+1 this month. While hope for a breakthrough must always be sustained, it must be a realistic hope informed and sobered by our experience of the past. We've seen this playbook before, as the Iranian regime artfully dodges their international commitments, generating friction with the global community, and thereby leverage fear and a sense of isolation to tighten their domestic control. I choose that designation, the Iranian regime, quite deliberately, and try never to use it interchangeably with the name Iran. Iran, after all, is a proud and historic society. Iran is the homeland of a great and accomplished people. Iran will endure far beyond any regime, much less this one, that fails to honor the hopes and aspirations of the Iranian people. The Iranian regime is something quite different than Iran. I say that as someone who has the distinct honor of being on Ahmadinejad's most wanted list. I have framed that list in my home, and I'm very proud to display it to anyone who comes to see it. The Irish rock star, my good friend Bono, tells young people to choose their enemies wisely because they will define you. I regard my inclusion on the list as a point of personal pride precisely for that reason. I'm very proud to regard as my enemy the brute mentality that inspires the Iranian regime to oppress its own people, to support international terrorist organizations, to reject international community's effort to peacefully resolve the regime's deliberate and persistent violations of international law, to flout the UN Security Council resolutions, and to brazenly breach its own treaties and agreements. I'm proud to regard as my adversary a system that sponsors the highest per capita execution rate in the world, including the world's highest execution rate for young people. Practices the cruel and barbaric forms of torture and disfigurement, sponsors the likes of Bashar Assad, providing his regime with weapons, manpower, and materiel to inflict war on his own people, and turns hundreds of thousands of Syrians into refugees. A system that serially violates human rights, persistently threatens its neighbors, rejects the right of Israel to exist, and opposes the peaceful resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's the Iranian regime that has continuously sought to undermine peace and stability in Iraq and to foster sectarian division, utilizing its cohorts in Baghdad to hector and harass the refugees of Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty. As you know, the humane and proper treatment of the Ashraf refugees is an issue on which many of us here have devoted much time and attention. Since the United States turned over its responsibility to the Maliki government in 2009, the treatment of the Ashraf refugees has been a travesty. And as a result, to the United States honor and dignity, the murder, harassment, and mistreatment to which the people of Ashraf have been subject is a sad, sad chapter in our history, a stain on the international community and an indictment on the Iraqi government that has allowed itself to be used as a tool of Tehran. It is the responsibility of all countries of goodwill to ensure that the victimization of the Ashraf refugees is not perpetuated and that this debacle comes to a swift and just conclusion, along the lines that Mayor Giuliani just identified. In fulfilling this obligation, the United States must demonstrate the kind of leadership befitting our values and our traditions. Before concluding, I would like to tell a story, a true story that I think you're familiar with, but that captures the currents of our times. It's one that touches me greatly, and it's one that I tell my children because it's one of courage, tragedy, but nonetheless out of it, great hope for the future. Over 3.5 years ago, a beautiful 18-year-old Iranian woman named Neda Aga Sultan an aspiring musician and photographer, was standing on the streets of Tehran. Accompanied by her music teacher, she was viewing a massive protest against the regime's fraudulent presidential election. Though guilty of no crime, unarmed, and posing no danger except for her ideals, she was targeted by a sniper from a nearby rooftop. Moments later, a bullet pierced her chest and Netta bled to death where she fell. The shot was fired by a member of the Iranian militia. Almost instantaneously, video footage and cell phone pictures of the killing cascaded across the internet to every corner of the globe, much like is happening today, yet again. It has been called the most widely witnessed death in human history. The incident prepared the ground for the awakening across the region. It helped galvanize the world in opposition to a repressive regime, and it serves as a reminder of what the cause of reform is all about. Today, Netta has awards, scholarships, and schools named in her honor. I don't know what became of her murderer, but I'm betting this. History will show that Netta and the cell phone messages, electronic images, and the internet posts which shared her dreams and told her story will prove far more powerful than the assassins and the guns that tried to silence her hopes and the hopes of our 6 victims and our wounded today. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, that's the future we're entering. The future that should serve as a warning to the Iranian regime that their days are numbered, not because of the condemnation and resolve of the international community that will insist on Iran's compliance with international law. They are numbered because your people will not cease their demand for a government that reflects the hopes and aspirations of a people who want to be free. The fulfillment of these hopes and aspirations rest on the establishment of a unified, principled, courageous, and organized civic opposition, one that can touch people's hearts as well as their minds, one that can harness their passion and convictions to ensure not only that spring returns to Iran, but that spring blossoms into an enduring season of peace and prosperity. And I would hope that everyone interested in such a future would examine closely the 10 points set forth by Mrs. Rajavi about what tomorrow should look like. I won't read them again because you know what they are. But that, my friends, is a future worth creating. Thank you for being here, and thank you for devoting your voice and your passions to this great cause.